This episode is brought to you by Catalyst. Catalyst combines beautiful design with modern technology to provide the most powerful customer success platform, helping companies reduce churn and improve customer experience at scale. They also create and post relevant and hilarious startup memes every day. So check them out on LinkedIn or at catalyst.io. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unapologetic, a podcast dedicated to giving people of color a voice and an opportunity to share their journey with the world. My name is Kalina Bryant. I'm the founder of Unapologetic, and I'll be your host for today. I am so excited to introduce our next guest speaker, Heather Hiles, over 50 Forbes lister, entrepreneur, investor, and more. A little bit about Heather. She is the manager partner of Black Ops Ventures. She has served as a founding CEO and president of Cal Bright College, California's first public online-only community college from 2019 to 2020. Heather is currently a board member at Udemy, an online education company that serves 45 million students around the globe. She is also a board member of Black Girls Code and Luminary Media, and much more. Heather is also an EdTech veteran, the founder of the learning platform Pathbright in 2012, which was sold to an investor in 2015. Earlier in her career, Heather also served as the deputy director at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they focused on higher education. There is so many things to this bio that is just incredible to me. But what I get out of this is Heather is definitely a trailblazer, and I am delighted to have you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, let's get into it. I mean, the moment I met you in Abu Dhabi in March at our Forbes summit, where we brought together Forbes 30 under 30, Forbes 50 over 50, who would have known we would get here? I learned a lot about you around perseverance, resiliency, and just listening to your journey changed my perspective in the world and who I wanted to be. So I want to dive in and just kick things off on, first off, your story behind leaving San Francisco to get funding, and just talk to me a little bit about that journey.
So I had worked with a number of different investors in the San Francisco area, a number of venture capitalists and a number of technologists through different businesses. I was running a consulting business in philanthropy, where I was helping individual former, CEOs and founders of companies, and as well as large entities, figure out how to have the most strategic impact possible with their philanthropic dollars. And so I had a good, robust amount of relationships in the Bay Area where I'd gone to school at UC Berkeley, et cetera. But when it came time for me to raise venture capital for my startup, Pathbright, it was a different situation. What I found very quickly is that while people were comfortable with me setting up their philanthropic work, they didn't have the same kind of confidence and inclination to invest in my startup in the way that I saw them investing in their friends that they had gone to school with, lived next door to, that sort of thing. So what it felt like for me is when I built Pathbright, my first customer was Stanford University. They asked me to build out enterprise software. That's why I needed to raise venture capital. So I rode up to Sand Hill Road to all the usual suspects. And the minute I'd walk in the door of the reception area, I felt like I was being treated like, are you in the wrong place? Can I help you? Do you have a package for us, kind of thing? I wasn't dressed for delivering a package. So it was a rude awakening for me, really. And it became very crystal clear to me that there was a separate set of standards and expectations for people who are going to be founders of tech companies that could become potentially billion-dollar entities. That there is, when you're investing, there's a level of comfort and confidence you have to have in people, that they share your similar priorities, that they use the same kinds of sort of rationale and and common sense that you would use in managing a company. And I think just the lack of familiarity with me in so many different ways in my package made it hard for them to get to that point where they were ready to invest in people, because I saw them writing checks for people who had far less, didn't have the same traction I had, didn't have customers, had an idea on a PowerPoint, maybe weren't nearly as buttoned down, but like I said, their kids went to the same nursery school, or they were in the same cycle group. And here I was from LA, from Crenshaw, raised by a single mom. I'm non-binary, I'm Black, and I don't live next door to them, and I live in Oakland. And there were just a lot of differences. And I felt like at the end of the day, they'd say, you have a great business model, I see the traction. But writing that lead check, they weren't ready to do that. And I know back in 2011, 2012, when I was raising money, very few women were being invested in, and almost no Black or brown people were there. I'll say one other thing about that. When I launched my company at TechCrunch Disrupt, when I was on the floor and there were maybe 1,000, 1,500 people in the same big building, I was searching for Black faces, and I really didn't see any. So what I had to do was reorient myself. Here I was bringing in education technology to market, these digital portfolios. What I realized, I needed to go to people who would give me domain credit, knowledge for having domain expertise. At that time, I was 15, maybe close to 20 years in having been in the learning, education, and workforce development or training areas. So I had a lot of expertise, and I needed investors who would say, yeah, we know you're going to know how to go to market. We know you know what you're building. And that kind of confidence came from more traditional education investors who were in New York and on the East Coast. And then one of my investors was also ACT, the testing company. So the lesson that I learned from that is, as we've always done in every part of our lives being Black Americans, we're kind of like the rivers. And when there's a rock that shows up, you just got to go one side over it or to the other side. And you got to just keep finding your people who can have the confidence, can evaluate you and back you.
Well said. And if I'm not mistaken, even with all those trials and tribulations, I know you said it better than I'm gonna attempt, but you said that you had one of the highest exits ever, right? And also, did you raise some of the highest capital as
Yeah. So unfortunately, and I couldn't even talk about it then because it was so painful to me because so few Black women were funded back then. But from 2012 through 2018, I was the Black woman who had raised the most venture capital and then had the largest exit. And just to level set things, I raised $12 million, which is that was my seed round and my Series A, but it wasn't $100 million. And I knew my white male counterparts were getting capitalized at far faster, better rates than I was. And even today, and we may want to talk more about it later, but today there have only been 400. There are fewer than 430 Black Americans who have been venture backed. Only 1% of venture backed founders are Black. And then only 0.003% of venture-backed founders are Black women. So that gives you some perspective about the inefficiency of capital going to Black Americans, particularly Black women.
Wow. Just those stats alone.
Yeah.
So what I get out of this is just the amount of resiliency that you've had. I'm assuming even with those incredible numbers, even with the 12 million, the amount of no's that you must have had to endure. So for our audience, we're all going through different obstacles. And I love the way you put it, we're like a river. So all those different bumps. My question for you is, if you're going to be in this game, if you're going to believe in your idea, if you are going to succeed, regardless of what someone says or how many no's you receive. What's your advice to these individuals?
My big kind of Uber advice is you've got to be true to yourself. You've got to know what it is that you want out of life, that you need to have happen. And you need to take every experience and every challenge and put it into context. Sometimes, when things have shut down for me and I realized I can't continue or grow them anymore, it's because that's where, not really where I'm meant to be I'm not serving my highest calling. I'm not doing what makes me happiest or where I'm having the most impact. And it means that tributary needs to be cut off because another one needs to happen. And so I take, life is just about learning and iterating and hopefully getting closer and closer to the things that make you feel self-actualized and happy and content in your life. And I genuinely, I pray for that. I meditate for that, for not just myself, but for all of humanity. And so you've got to put things in the context that if you're doing your very best work and you're growing and you're iterating, you should be iterating towards not only where you have, your biggest achievement or whatever it is that you have on kind of your professional goals or whatever, but that you're getting closer to where you want to be in life and what you want to be doing. My wife said to me the other day that every day is like Russian roulette, and she's not wrong. I mean, it's kind of scary sounding, but tomorrow isn't promised. And so every time you're pulling that trigger, for what? Is it enhancing, your sense of purpose and impact, or satisfaction and meaning in your life, or happiness, joy? That's just keep it in context. And I would say for everything, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm used to just kind of picking myself back up and working at something every day, and that's the only way I know how to get things done. And I'm a builder, and so. But I try, and I've really worked at it for the past 20 years for sure, at finding space and time to contemplate, to relax, to have fun, to have perspective. And I just got to say, that's so important. And I think a lot of us have figured that out, especially during COVID, when a lot of our priorities and our activities were really kind of flipped on the other end.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I'm still giggling in my head because I can imagine Debbie looking at you.
I got a million Debbieisms because they just come out. My wife is prolific and very articulate, and she says a lot of stuff. I'm like, that's a good one. And it just sticks with me.
Yeah, that actually makes me think about, as you are always persevering and going through these different stages, what I hear is you have a certain amount of armor around you. And what I mean by armor is a diversified portfolio of individuals who look out for you, that's going to give you the best advice, that's going to support you regardless of if you're at the highest of your peak or at the very lowest. And then secondly, you had mentioned showing up to these firms and they thought you were the help. And it's interesting because I've seen some of the shoes that you wear and they are very, very nice. So I would never assume that you were delivering a package. But where I'm getting at with this is, number one, having individuals around you that push you, that give you the opportunities and give you the motivation that you need is important. And then second, your armor of when you feel good, when you look good, you can present yourself regardless of what people say. And I think as an entrepreneur, you need that, because if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to believe in you? So if we're thinking about the armor, what's the advice to give to these individuals that are just starting out, right? That Blacks, we don't like to ask for money, asking for millions of dollars, even though we believe in our idea, somehow sounds so foreign to us. How do we go about changing that mindset?
Yeah. No, that is true. I know that in certain instances, if I'm on a sales call, I'm pitching for money or whatever, I am definitely I have to have my gear. So I got to get my clothes have to be a certain way. I just have to have all the pieces together. My presentation's got to be tight. I've got to be ready. And what I will say to all people, and especially to young people, I've got kids 26 to 30, and I say to them, there are no shortcuts. You've got to, first of all, you've got to be a generalist, and that you got to learn to be a good communicator. You need to master a certain level of numeracy and finance and basic life skills. But then you need to become expert in your area of what you're doing. So, if I'm bringing to market a certain technology, I've got to be an expert in that offering, in that technology, top to bottom, nose to tail, however you want to say it. And there are no shortcuts for that. So the preparation and the clarity and I got to say, in this world today, quieting your space so that you can not only be expert in all the details, but not get caught up in the noise of what's happening all around you. Because sometimes I see people are spreading themselves so thin that they don't go very deep on anything. And so once somebody needs to engage to the level where they want to invest in you, or they're considering, investing, buying your services, and it's a you're asking people to make trade-offs and to choose your thing over something else, you've got to have a comprehensive, deep knowledge of what you're offering. And so that takes a certain amount of patience. It takes some attention span. It takes preparation, and it takes sitting with stuff sometimes to just be grounded in it. And so I think that there's kind of a dual thing where you got to be knowledgeable at a level, kind of a high level, about current affairs and a lot of things going on and how they can affect your world. But there's nothing like taking the time and being patient and knowing that you're comfortable with your material and you're comfortable with yourself. The other thing that I especially want to encourage Black folks about, but all people, is don't worry about what everybody else is doing, because most people are just trying to emulate other people. And if you spend all that energy just being your best you, that's really all. And then the good news about that is there's no competition. Literally, you're the only one. And so if I'm busy trying to be Kalina, I'm not going to get it right. But if I could just try to be my best self, look, there's no one else. I know that there's no one else like me out there. And so let me just do that. And I try to just do that a little bit better every day. And I feel like the people in my life who know me and love me, whether they have all the wisdom, no one person has all the perfect wisdom for me, but if they can sometimes, especially at my lowest point, help reflect and remind me about me, I don't need them to tell me how to be them or somebody else, but if they can just remind me of what I have that's an asset that's valuable, that I have to offer people in relationships and in business and in society, then that's what I find comfort in. Somebody who just knows me and can tell me, and at my darkest days reflect back to me why they love me, what I have to offer, that I'm enough. That's really been something, especially in my 40s and 50s, just feeling like I'm enough as is, that I don't have anything in particular I have to prove. I remember my 40s literally waking up in the middle of the night thinking, have I done what I'm supposed to do on this planet? Is it enough? And while that can be good to drive you, and that's, I think, sometimes an important question to ask, and I'm not saying I've arrived completely, but a little less anxiety about that. I have less anxiety about that now, and a little bit more comfort with what I'm doing right now is good enough, and it's plenty. And next day, whatever I choose to do will be great too. And no judgment about it. So I think we need to be really loving and clear and try to really care for ourselves. I remember going to a memorial service for a man I had worked with through college. His name was Ronnie Stevenson, and he was a former Black Panther. And he built this tutorial program that I helped him run called Break the Cycle. And at his memorial service, Angela Davis was there, and these great professors, Charles Henry and others. And Charles Henry, who taught this class about Black history and civil rights and everything, he was saying, the number one thing a revolutionary can do is feed yourself well and be healthy. Exercise, relax, eat well, because you're not any good for anybody else if you're not healthy and you're not good for yourself. And so the self-care includes having people, my friends and family, and my business colleagues, and definitely my teammates that I've done stuff with, in companies and on the basketball court. These are all people who mean so much to me, and they give so much to me that help me be grounded and be happy in this world. And we all need that. We all definitely need that and deserve that kind of support.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. This actually gets me to a question for you around trust. So, the higher you go, I understand that you have your trusted individuals that you're close with, family and friends. However, when you're in those rooms and you're the only individual, I got out of this of, making sure that you're the expert in your environment. But however, talk to me about, how do you manage the loneliness of climbing the ladder, whether that's the corporate ladder or the entrepreneur ladder. Right. It may be nice to have the private advisory board that you have with the friends and the family, but what do you do when you're still in that day role? How do you trust or how do you pick who to trust is probably the first question.
I don't know that I have perfected my picker, and there are times but I have on my relationship side, and that was a whole journey. So I feel great about that. And that's probably the most important. But I'm somebody like this. I try to work with and collaborate with a lot of people. And I'm quick to do it because I get excited. I see the potential and I want to try it. And I'm an experiential learner. So I got to do, if I really want to learn or master anything, it comes from the doing for me. And so I have tried a lot of collaborations that didn't pan out. And even those that in the long run have settled into their proper place, I've had a lot of hard times, oftentimes getting to that point of trust, because the problem is, you set off on a new venture with somebody that you don't know very well, and you don't have a history. You don't go, oh yeah, you've been saying that same old thing for 5 years, and I know what you mean by that, and I know what it takes to get us beyond it. Or if you say, no, I know you mean maybe, or whatever the things are. But when you don't have that shorthanded, you don't have that experience, it's really hard. And what I try to do is over-index in the areas of communicating my expectations, my interpretations, my feelings, my experiences, because they don't know me and they can't read me. And when I'm not feeling heard, respected, heated, or whatever, I say that, and I'm very direct. So I remember one time that my daughter Maya and I had this very interesting conversation where I said, I thought she wasn't being, I thought she was being a little bit rude. And she said, well, you're very direct and I can be direct too. And I said, there's a total difference between direct and rude. And what you've got to do, I'm being direct with you right now, but I'm not being rude. I'm not calling you out your name. I'm not being short with you. I don't have a tone. I'm not doing anything like that, but I am being very direct. And so what I've found is the more direct and honest you can be about your experiences, your needs, your feelings, the better. and the less you can leave things to for interpretation, or for, I'm not going to tell you exactly how I feel, but I'm going to let you try and worry and wonder and try and figure it out. Like, that stuff is not helpful to building deep relationships. And what I've learned is people can say a lot of things, but actions speak volumes to me. So if I give you notice that this is what I need, and so your actions time and time again can't be respectful of what I'm asking for, then you're telling me either you really don't understand, or you haven't bothered to listen to me and hear me, or you don't care and you're intentionally doing something different. Whatever the case, then I need to act accordingly. And so I'm the type of person, I have a really, really long fuse, and I'm going to really try to make it work. But if you have time and time again, your actions, regardless of what your words are saying, if your actions can't follow through, then I'm going to quit you. And it's just that simple. And you've got to quit people. So if you have to work with them in a big organization, maybe you don't have that choice. But then what I would do is sort of protect myself. And I've left organizations where people weren't honest, didn't treat me right, didn't treat somebody on my team right. And I just said, look, I gave you all these warnings. I tried to make this work. You can't seem to respect that. I'm out. I told you I wasn't going to do this with you, and I'm not. And so that's again, another thing you can verify with my wife. She's like, well, you're going to quit them, aren't you? I have to. I'm trying not to. You see me trying. And I swear to heaven, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt multiple times. And I want it to be the best case scenario. But I also have a certain set of standards for myself, and respect for myself, and love for myself. And I won't do it indefinitely.
Mm-hmm. Whew, preach. When is your book? When is your book coming out, Heather? I think that should be in the front of the self-help section. I mean, I think Heather's 10 principles. Read it.
Yeah, that's definitely one. I will quit you, but I give you a lot of room, and I'm super direct about it. And so it's never, ever, ever a surprise. It's never a surprise.
Okay. I like that. And I think that what I get out of all of this, I heard you say it's important to be grounded, and it's important to, of course, like, watch people's motives and actions. We all know that actions speak louder than words scenario. But what it sounds like, even if we put this into a business perspective, if you're going to have partnerships with someone, you have to trust them. But how do you get to that point? You have to over communicate is what I hear, but also you have to sit back and watch. Did you say something and it's still not being, given to you? Are the actions being met? And that goes for any stage of your career, whether that's you working in a day job, whether that's being an entrepreneur. Even if someone's willing to write you a $1 million check, if you can't trust them, is that good money?
Okay, so that's a very important question. That's a very important question.
Yeah.
All money is not good money. And I have a ton of stories personally, but oodles, tens, if not hundreds of stories from other people other founders who have been mistreated and taken advantage of by working with the wrong investors. So one, top 10 on my list is my lead investor, VC. At some point decided all of our great technology would be so well used in another of his portfolio companies that he, unbeknownst to me, had a partner fly to ACT, our investor in Iowa, and say, hey, I've got a great idea. We want to sell Pathbright to this other company in our portfolio. We'd have Heather maybe go to the board. We'd have her independent board member, probably get rolled off, and such and such and so and so. And my board member and investor from ACT, he picked up the phone and he called me and did you know that this was happening? I had no idea. Now that's not a proper partner. And I swear to you that every everything that this investor said was right, and all the things that they had done were right, but they were taking advantage of things I wasn't looking out for and things that I had no expectation of happening. I've seen over 20 CEOs kicked out of their companies by VCs who oftentimes run the companies into the ground once they've gotten rid of the founder CEO. But we're not in the spirit of trying to collaborate and mutually deciding or coming to a realization that maybe the company's outgrown the CEO or something of that nature, but just a sense of hubris and thinking that they're playing Monopoly here and should do better. And so it's important to acknowledge that there are different circumstances, and I'm writing a lot about right now what the roles and responsibilities are of board members. And it's especially those board members who are investors, but board members in general, who are responsible for the governing and the hiring and the firing and the management of the CEOs. And that is a lot of responsibility. So what you want is people who are responsible, who have fiduciary responsibility, who can think about the best interests of the organization and not just their own self-interest or their portfolio's returns or doing someone else's bidding. What you want are people who really, really have good judgment, and they really, first and foremost, as a director, are thinking about what's best for the company or the organization. And I will tell you, being on both sides of the table, having been on both sides of the table, and going through a really hard reorg right now, it is so much work when you are on a board where you have to make changes. And I promise you, up and down, for years and years with the board work that I'm doing right now, we have given so many kinds of input and tried to bring along a leader who will reject input and feedback. And so there are instances where you have to make changes. But it is important to know that you work with people who are honest, who have integrity, who are not trying to withhold or prevent you from seeing the full picture and knowing what's going on. And that's the best you can ask for, because if you're a founder of a company, like when I founded PathBright, I genuinely wanted what was the very best for the company and the employees every single day and all of our customers. I wanted what was best for the company. And so if there had ever been a time, I promised myself, when we ended up selling, because it was the best offer on the table, when I wanted to continue taking the company forward, that I promised myself and my employees that I would do what was in their best interest and not be self-serving for what we would do. And that led us to selling the company and getting a good return for our investors and for our employees. But it can be really hard, and it takes a lot of work for people to be able to separate their ego and their personalities, especially when you're a founder, from the best interest of, when you're responsible for a community of people, your employees that you have, sold into this because of stock or because they believe in the mission. And so you have a whole set of constituencies that you have to think about instead of just yourself. And it's in those times when decisions are hard that having people you trust, that you are interdependent with, that really will work with you. And it's like, we don't know all the answers today, but if we all work together, we can figure out what's best and right for this challenge. And that comes with working with people, but also choosing and observing people and being clear about, are they really intellectually honest? Are they honest to people in general? I've been amazed in society how many people have sort of glamorized being charlatans and being con people and being just liars. And, from the presidency to, people who've raised hundreds of millions of dollars on lies. And I'm like, wow. I truly hope and pray that our kids aren't aspiring to become these people, because it's so empty. It doesn't usually work out very well. But I would just never want to lay my head down at night and feel like I was that person, look in the mirror, have to look in the eyes of people that I care about, and I want them to care about me. So, but watching people's behaviors, and also if you're doing something like raising money, take the time. It's so alluring when you've got people who are saying really nice things to you, and they're like, "Hey, we'll invest, 10 million in your company." You're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." It's so easy to think how hard it is if you don't get that money, but I promise you, you are literally dependent and interdependent with these people, and if you get into business with the wrong people, you will regret it. And there's no alternative. It will never work out the way you want.
Wow. I mean, all of that by itself is just, to get to the point of where you are right now, Heather, you have a load of wisdom, I would say. And also you are very comfortable in who you are. And I think that, what I have learned from you and what I see in you is you can be your best self and give good advice, because you're not trying to be anyone else. And you're very comfortable I like what you said about the ego. That is so hard, by the way. I would say in any stage of your life, right? Sometimes, when you're making choices, even me personally, myself, I've had to take my ego out of certain situations in order to make wise decisions. And as a human being, that is extremely hard. Especially just in America alone, ego comes first, unfortunately. But what I'm getting at on this particular question that's coming up is, when did you get to a point of, understanding who you are and being comfortable? We had talked about this previously. You identify as non-binary, and you had mentioned, you were like, I was identifying as non-binary before it was a thing, and now we're in a buzz world, right?
Yeah.
So all that you are, and just being okay with showing up into these rooms, like I'm trying to articulate, sometimes being Black, and on your resume, your name, people are changing their names now so they can be presented in the best way to get the job. People are changing like their background and not being honest as to where they are from, because they think that it will hurt them. But we all know that you have to be honest with who you are in order to make a true impact, or at least a long lasting impact. But what are the steps to get there?
Yeah. I mean, and, it's not always the easy way. I want to acknowledge that. And even at my, stage in life, this is a painful example, but I'm going to give it to you. I remember when I was the CEO at Calbright College, and I had an evaluation by 17 trustees who were my board, and the chair of the board, he starts by saying, he says, you've exceeded every single milestone that we set up at the first board meeting, and that you presented to us. And so 1,000 people, online training, and they're already getting, about to get hired. And you've just done so much more than we thought or asked you to do so far. But, we don't all like interacting with you. You're a real, you're like an entrepreneur, and you're real kind of sharp about stuff. And he went on and on and on. And another trustee piped in, not in the actual evaluation, but offline. She said to me, she was going on that list. She's like, we're used to people who work with politicians. You spend a lot of schmooze time, and you have like this agenda, and you're going to go through all this stuff, and we don't really care for that. And then she said, we don't like dealing with some woman dressed in man's clothing. And I was like, okay. And this is a Black woman who said this to me. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's, I guess I appreciate the honesty. But I'm not changing. I've been dressing in men's clothing for a couple of decades now. I have a haberdashery I enjoy very much, and that's just who I am. And so, if you have problems with my exterior and that prevents you from being able to work for me, I mean, that's something to think about for everybody, I think. Just aside from the discrimination in that, but just like people can be so superficial, and I think it's I've had a couple of blessings that have made me given me the space to be exactly who I want to be and exactly who I am. First, I was raised by a single mom who loved me to death, but wasn't necessarily into parenting. So I really have raised myself in a lot of ways. And the good news about that is she gave me the freedom to do anything and everything I wanted to do. So I'll joke a lot of times and say I'm one of the few free Negroes that I know in this country, because I don't have certain parameters or limitations that have anything to do with race, culture, ethnicity, gender, or anything else. It's kind of like I have rules of conduct and values, absolutely. But I've crafted them and I abide by them and I'm accountable to them. And I don't need anybody else to dictate those to me. And so I got to experiment, being the little entrepreneur and tinkerer I've always been. I've always had the privilege of doing that. And so, in high school, I was reading Nietzsche and all the top philosophers. And I was tinkering with whatever I wanted to get into. And that made, then in college. So in high school, one of the things is that not because my mother always taught me that, LGBT people were as cool, if not cooler than everybody else, even though she was heterosexual. But in college, I was closeted, and I, had a girlfriend and maintained a girlfriend and a boyfriend at all times. And my boyfriend was started the football team and the basketball team. And, there was the external thing. And my life was very fragmented. I was the only Black person in the AP courses at Santa Barbara High School, which my mother made me go to. We moved up from LA. And my life was 100 different fragments. And I could maintain and juggle all of it. When I went to UC Berkeley, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop being gay because it's exhausting. And that worked until I fell in love with somebody. And so I quit my boyfriend, who was then on the football team, and had my girlfriend. And so I realized at UC Berkeley that what I wanted to do more than anything was integrate all the aspects of my life and be just one person who didn't have to show one side one way and one side the other way. Now, I'm not saying that me partying is the same person that I show up to at the boardroom. No, but so code switching has to happen. Things like that have to happen. But they just get the professional side, or if I'm focused on a business issue, then that's different than if I'm a, partying issue. But otherwise, 98% of who I am is all integrated. And they're just different, kind of switches I'm turning for different purposes. But what I realized, by 18 was that I needed to be able to be my whole self everywhere I show up. And I've been blessed to have sort of maybe an expedient kind of route to getting there, but it's never too late. And like my wife, who's writing a book about, our relationship and our coming together, has really shown me that even in the 40s and 50s, some of us are really just still learning who we are. My grandmother, after my grandpa died, she was like 80, and she had a whole other chapter until 93 when she passed away. So we all find and grow, and being able to be fully expressed, fully real about who we are at this time and how we are growing. It doesn't mean you have to be just one static person all the time, but it sure is great to be able to just be as clear and open as you can about where you are and who you are. It's exhausting when you're having to play a role. And I think it is really hard in this society. I think it's really, I've seen, we've all seen people who've taken their lives or just been miserable because they can't be their full selves for whatever reason. And we're blessed because, I got Dorothy Dandridge on the wall over there. And there are a lot of people who had to either pass or be so ridiculed all the time for who they were, for just being Black or just being a Black, well-read and writing person or whatever. And we don't have any of those restrictions per se. But I think it is our calling to be our true selves. I really do. I know that maybe sounds corny, but and I think it's also a good. It makes me happy to be this way. I would recommend it to anybody else.
It's like, what's your health check?
If people can't handle it, then I would recommend just removing yourself from those work situations or those personal situations if people can't take it.
Yeah. What came to mind to me was, when people are saying, what's the vitamins that you take today? It seems like your vitamin is just showing up on who you are every day and being okay with it.
Yeah. And my favorite source of vitamin D is the sun. I like to just be out in the open with the full sun. And yes, it's my favorite vitamin for that reason.
Nothing's wrong with that. Hey, Miami gives you that every day. So kudos. Well, I thank you for the honesty, Heather, and just being so raw. That's the purpose of the podcast, because we are in a world, especially when you're wearing a business hat. I like what you said about you can be your whole self. And yes, sometimes you have to code switch, but that's not changing who you are. That's just making sure that the expertise, if you're an expert right now as a board member on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., you're going to put that hat on. But if you are going to be an expert at fundraising at 5 p.m. for, a politician, you are going to be an expert for fundraising an event at 5. And it's exactly nothing wrong with that, no. And it doesn't change. You're still Heather that whole day. Exactly. And I think that we need to be honest.
That's right. So, if I'm talking finance or I'm talking communications or I'm talking poker or whatever, it's all me. And I'm trying to bring my best to whatever it is that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And my best includes me being my full self,
Mm-hmm. I like that. And that's my definition right now of empowerment, right? Sometimes we have these buzzwords now, especially it seems like the last 2 years, it's been authenticity. It's been empowerment, they sound they're very nice words, but if there's no true meaning behind them, they are just words. So I love it that you've put some meaning behind your version of empowerment, in all shades of who you are. And I think that being you is going to allow for other individuals to dare to be different or dare to be who they want to be and still find success. So I commend you on who you decided to be without apologizing. You're unapologetic about everything. And I think that is, we need that. So before we close out, I would like to open it up to ask you, what other advice would you like to give to this audience, regardless if it's coming out as whoever you want to be, your true self, whether it's getting your first round of funding or whether it's, going after your first board opportunity. What advice would you like to leave the mic today?
Mm-hmm. I would say a couple things. One is I've always found that if I have a vision and I have a dream and I can flesh that out, that's a destination. Once I have the clarity on the destination, then I can reverse engineer how to get there. And it doesn't always happen. Like I can tell you, and I've said this many times with my wife, and now she's like, I see exactly how this works. I'd say, we can get from A to B, and I can tell you that we'll be at point B by such and such a time, but I can't tell you exactly the path we'll take to get there. I can't tell you all the steps right now, but I can tell you that if we want to be at destination B, we can get there. And so what works for me is having that white canvas, that clean canvas, that white sheet of paper, and putting on exactly what the destination is for my personal goals, health goals, professional, whatever, and then doing the work to doing the research to figure out what are the steps, then letting the things unfold and show up that need to show up when they do, for you to take those right steps, and trial and error, trying to take some steps that are going the wrong direction, realizing, and then correcting your path. These are all things that are part of the journey of getting there. But there's no dream that I think is too big or too silly or too ridiculous. And by the way, the only person you need to really satisfy with your dreams and your goals is yourself. And I think that that's probably the most important lesson that I try to remind myself. I'm consistently and persistently concerned with, am I taking care of others in the right way? And again, I think you are taking care of others if you're taking care of yourself well. And I think the other part of the advice that goes hand in hand with that is it does take your good work. I know a lot of times people will say, prayer is great, but prayer without work is empty. You've got to do both. You've got to have the vision and the inspiration, and you've got to follow that up with all the right work. And there are no shortcuts to the work. The good news is that unlike when I was younger, there is no shortage of information and affordable, if not free information available to you all over the place. So there's no shortage about people who've done what you're trying to do, people who've thought what you've thought about, people who are happy to teach you how to do things. You can learn absolutely everything you want to learn. So I guess in summation, I would say, please be a lifelong learner and have confidence in your own growth.
Well said. Well said. Well, Heather, thank you so much for making the time. And for our listeners out there, Heather, how do they find you? Do you have a website? Do you have an email? How would you like people to stay connected with you?
Yeah, probably the best way to stay connected is through my LinkedIn account. I do post articles from time to time, and I do try to stay up with all of the messages that come in. So it's probably the best way to get in touch with me. You will find me on the Black Ops Ventures website. You will find me on the Udemy website. But if you reach out to me and we have other ways other business we have to do, I'll stay in touch. So that's probably the best way.
Thank you. And I looked at your LinkedIn. You have 121,000 followers. Wow. Very nice. Very nice. Well, with that, to all of our listeners, we provide a space for individuals to be unapologetic about themselves, to share their journey, in hopes that you can create a journey that you're satisfied with. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.